All right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time, we're going to be talking about the future of space exploration, which is always a fascinating topic. We've
Always.
got a whole bunch of articles here. It's like a mix of things. We've got plans from like NASA and other space agencies. We've got stuff from corporations, and we've got some looks into what's going on right now, like current projects.
Yeah. And what's really cool about all of this is like we're not talking about something that's like way out there in the future anymore. We're talking about plans and like specific timelines, things that are actually in development. So it's like we're really on the edge of a whole new era.
Yeah, it does feel like things are really moving quickly now.
Yeah.
And speaking of things that are moving and also getting kind of old, we should probably talk about the ISS,
Okay.
the International Space Station.
Yeah.
It's been like a symbol of collaboration around
Yeah.
decades. But it's also getting pretty old.
It is. Yeah, the ISS is supposed to be like operational until around 2030, which kind of begs the question, what happens to it after that? Like after decades it's been up there.
Yeah, what do they do with it?
What do they do with it?
It seems like the easiest thing is to just deorbit it.
Right.
But I mean, I've also heard about ideas like a commercial takeover.
Hmm.
Like, what do you think is more likely to happen?
Well, deorbiting is, I mean, that's like bring it back to Earth and it burns up in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
So that is definitely possible. But there's also this huge push for commercializing space.
Yeah.
And so, maybe some company steps in and says, hey, we can use that maybe for research, maybe for tourism, maybe even manufacturing. Just imagine like a private space station.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
But I do wonder about just the logistics of that, right?
Right.
I mean, keeping the ISS up and running is already really complicated and expensive.
So, like, wouldn't a commercial company have even more problems with, like, space debris and just how old the station is and everything?
Well, yeah, I mean, that is a huge concern, right? Like, maintaining a human presence in space constantly is a big responsibility. And we've seen what can happen if things go wrong with, with deorbiting and stuff. Like, remember Skylab back in '79?
Yeah.
That was a pretty good reminder of what could go wrong. But, the commercial space industry is making a lot of progress, and they are finding ways to, make space more sustainable, I guess you could say, and make it more affordable, too.
Well, that's good. So the future of the ISS might be, up in the air, but it sounds like space stations themselves are, like, just getting started,
Oh, yeah.
It's not the end. Especially with all these new companies and players coming in.
Totally. So you've got Axiom Space, for example. They're already working on plans for a commercial space station that would replace the ISS. But you've also got NASA, and they're not just sitting around either. They've got 3 projects in the works for a new space station near Earth. You've got Starlab, you've got Orbital Reef, and then there's this really ambitious one, the Lunar Gateway.
Oh, yeah. That's like for the moon missions, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's part of the Artemis program.
Yeah, Artemis.
Yeah.
Trying to get people back on the moon by 2025. So it's like they're building infrastructure for people to stay there long term.
Yeah, exactly. Long-term presence on the moon, that's the goal. And they're not doing it alone. They're working with lots of other countries, Europe, Canada, Japan. It's a huge international effort.
I did not know that.
Okay.
So it's a global thing now.
Oh, yeah. Global effort to, explore space. And don't forget about China and Russia. They're working together, too, on a lunar program. They're also trying to get a research station on the moon by 2035.
So it's like a whole new space race. But this time it's about who can stay on the moon the longest.
Pretty much, yeah.
And speaking of ambitious plans in the moon, we can't forget about Elon Musk.
Right.
He wants to go to Mars. And he's got these timelines that are pretty aggressive. He wants to send a Starship to Mars, an uncrewed one, by 2026. And then he wants to get people there just a few years after that. Do you think he can really pull that off?
Well, Elon, he's always pushing things.
Yeah.
And yeah, those timelines are super ambitious.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't completely rule it out. I mean, SpaceX has done some pretty amazing stuff already in a very short time.
Right.
But there's still some really big challenges. Like, how do you keep people safe on a trip that long?
Yeah.
And then, like, once they get to Mars, how do you create a whole system that can support life, Like, how do they grow food?
Yeah, it's crazy to think about all the stuff they have to figure out.
Totally.
Like, I mean, radiation shielding and, like, producing water on a planet that's basically a desert.
Yeah.
It's just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And that's not even getting into, like, the psychological part of it.
Right. Like, imagine being stuck in a spaceship for months and months.
Yeah.
And then you're on this planet. It's totally alien. I mean, how do you even prepare someone for that?
Yeah, that's a huge challenge. It makes you think about, with all this talk about space travel and exploring other planets, like, are we actually getting closer to finding out if there's life out there?
Yeah.
It's a question that's always been there.
Well, I mean, think about how many exoplanets we've found recently. Thousands of them. And a lot of them are in what they call the habitable zone.
The habitable zone, that's like the Goldilocks zone, right? Not too hot, not too cold.
Exactly. Where it's just right for liquid water.
So there could be planets out there with like oceans and lakes and maybe even whole ecosystems.
It's crazy to think about,
I
right?
know, it's wild. But have we actually found any proof of life yet? Or are we just like hoping?
Well, not proof exactly, but there have been some really interesting clues. Scientists have found organic molecules, which is really exciting.
Yeah, those are like the building blocks of life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but just because they're there doesn't automatically mean there's life, you know? They could have come from somewhere else or something. But it's still a huge discovery.
So it's kind of like finding a piece of a puzzle. It doesn't mean you have the whole picture, but it gives you an idea.
Exactly. And with the James Webb Space Telescope, we'll be able to get an even closer look at those exoplanets.
Right. That's supposed to be like way more powerful than anything we have now, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a game changer. We might even be able to see if there are gases in their atmospheres that could be a sign of life.
It's amazing that we might actually find out if we're alone in the universe.
I know, right?
It's mind-blowing. And even if we don't find life on other planets, like, there's still some pretty cool stuff in our own solar system.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, like Mars, Europa, Enceladus.
Yeah, there's a lot of buzz about those places. Like, Mars used to be way warmer and wetter. We know that.
So you're saying there could have been, like, Martians hanging out there?
Who knows? Maybe.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, and then you've got Europa.
Yeah.
One of Jupiter's moons, right? It's got this huge ocean under the ice. It might have more water than all the oceans on Earth put together.
Wow.
And then there's Enceladus. It's shooting out water vapor and organic molecules into space.
So there's, like, a lot of potential for life in our own solar system.
Totally. And there are missions already planned to check them out. Like the European Space Agency's got JUICE.
Juice.
JUICE. Yeah, it's going to explore Jupiter's moons in the 2030s.
So we'll know more soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
But, let's take a break from space for a minute.
Okay, sure. What do you want to talk about?
How about the human brain?
Okay.
What's going on in neuroscience? Any breakthroughs you've heard about?
Well, one area that's really interesting is brain plasticity.
Brain plasticity.
Yeah, it turns out our brains are way more adaptable than we used to think. They're constantly changing and rewiring themselves.
So it's like you can teach an old dog new tricks.
Pretty much, yeah. The brain can keep learning and adapting throughout our lives.
Wow.
And that's super important for understanding how we learn things, how we remember things, and even how we recover from brain injuries.
So it's not all downhill after a certain age.
Nope, not at all.
That's really good news. What else is going on in neuroscience?
Well, there's been a lot of progress in brain-computer interfaces, which is a pretty wild area.
What is that?
It's basically technology that lets you control computers with your thoughts.
So, like, mind control.
Kinda, yeah. Scientists have already made devices that let people who are paralyzed move robotic arms just by thinking about it.
That's amazing.
It is, right. It could totally change how we interact with technology in the future.
And it could help people with disabilities, too.
Exactly.
Like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
And speaking of pushing the boundaries, there's artificial intelligence. It's even getting into the creative realm now.
AI doing creative stuff. How does that work?
We're talking about AI that can make music, write poems, even paint pictures. And they're getting so good, it's hard to tell the difference between AI art and human art.
So is that good or bad? I mean, some people might be worried about that, right?
It's definitely a big debate. Some people think AI can help us be more creative and explore new things. But others are worried that it might make human art less valuable or even replace human artists completely.
That's a good point.
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
And it's not just about art. I mean, AI is affecting almost every part of our lives, like how we work, how we talk to each other.
Right.
And it's making us think about ethics, like, is it fair? Is it safe? What does it even mean to be intelligent?
Yeah, that's a lot to consider.
Yeah,
It's like, as we get more advanced with technology, we have to make sure we're using it in the right way.
exactly. We have a responsibility to use it ethically.
Right. And that brings up another area where technology is pushing the boundaries. Genetic engineering.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. It has the potential to completely revolutionize medicine. We might be able to treat diseases that were impossible to cure before.
That would be incredible. But I guess there are ethical concerns too, right?
Definitely. Like, what about designer babies? Or what if we accidentally mess up the human genome?
Yeah, those are some serious questions.
We need to figure out how to handle this technology responsibly.
It's like that saying, with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. We need to have honest conversations about the ethics of all this scientific progress.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot today. Space travel, neuroscience, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering. It's amazing how fast things are changing.
It really is, and it's exciting to see what the future holds.
Before we wrap things up, I wanted to ask you about life extension. It seems like there's a lot of interest in that these days.
Ah, yes, the quest for immortality. Humans have been trying to figure that out forever. But now, with all these advances in things like regenerative medicine and biotechnology, it's starting to seem less like fantasy and more like a real possibility.
It's kind of wild to think that we could live much longer lives, but wouldn't that cause all sorts of problems? Like, what about overpopulation?
Yeah, there would definitely be challenges. Like, how would our society handle it if people were living for 150 years or 200 years or even longer?
Right. Everything would have to change.
Mm,
Our jobs, our economy, our whole way of thinking about life and death.
it's a big unknown.
Yeah. So do you think we're actually on the verge of a longevity revolution?
Well, we're definitely making progress in understanding how aging works, and we're finding ways to slow it down.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we'll actually achieve immortality. I guess time will tell.
It'll be interesting to see what happens.
It definitely will. I mean, it's a really big question, isn't it? Like, imagine if people were living to be 150 or 200 or even older. It would change everything about how we live and think.
Yeah, it's like a whole different world. It makes you wonder about, speaking of pushing boundaries, what about time travel? That's always been something that's fascinated people.
Time travel, yeah, it's the ultimate what if, right? Scientists have been thinking about it forever. And even though we don't have like a working time machine that we know of, there are actually some pretty interesting theories about how it might be possible.
Okay, so no hopping in a DeLorean and going back to the future just yet.
Not yet, no.
But what are some of these theories? Like, what could actually make time travel happen?
Well, one of the most mind-blowing ideas is something called wormholes.
Wormholes.
Yeah, they're like tunnels that connect different points in space and time.
Whoa.
So basically like shortcuts through the universe.
But wouldn't that, like, mess everything up? I mean, cause and effect. What if you went back in time and changed something?
Well, yeah, that's the paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
It gets really complicated. But according to Einstein's theory of relativity, wormholes could actually exist. The idea is that really massive objects can actually bend space and time, and if those bends are extreme enough, they could create a tunnel.
That's hard to imagine.
It is.
So are wormholes, like, real? Have we ever seen one?
Well, not that we know of, and even if they do exist, we'd need some crazy advanced technology to actually use them. But the fact that they're even possible is pretty wild.
It's definitely something to think about. Are there any other ways people are thinking about time travel?
There's another idea that comes from Einstein's theory of special relativity. It's called time dilation. Basically, the faster you move, the slower time goes for you compared to someone who's standing still.
Wait, really? So if you were on a spaceship going super fast, you would age slower than people on Earth?
That's the idea. Of course, to go that fast would take an unbelievable amount of energy.
Yeah, we don't have anything that can do that.
Right, not yet at least. But it shows how time and speed and gravity are all connected in this really weird way.
It's like science fiction, but maybe not so fictional after all. Maybe someday we'll actually figure out time travel.
Maybe, who knows? And if we do, it would raise a whole bunch of crazy questions like, could we change the past? Should we even try?
Yeah, it's a little scary to think about, actually.
It is, for sure. But it's also pretty exciting, right?
Yeah, it's mind-blowing to think about all this stuff. Well, I think that's about all the time we have for today. We've covered a lot. Space travel, aliens, the human brain, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, even time travel.
It's been quite the journey.
It really has. And it's amazing to think about how much we're learning and discovering all the time. I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is that we should never stop being curious.
I totally agree. Curiosity is what drives us to explore and learn and make new discoveries.
Exactly. And who knows what amazing things we'll find out in the future. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring and keep asking questions.